Hey everybody, welcome to the Football 360 Show. How you doing? Happy Tuesday to you, the fastest hour of football talk on the planet, as we come at you live on YouTube and X, as well as you can catch everything Football 360 at football360show.com and catch the audio versions of this on Apple and Spotify as well. How you doing today, Matt?
Doing great, JP.
Inching closer and closer to football season of all kinds. You got the pro, you got the college stuff, you got high school stuff. I know they're wrapping up kind of this last week, everybody getting their scrimmages and their 7-on-7s in. And so they're busy. You're seeing rankings come out for college. You see where Mizzou's picked this to finish sixth, I think, in the SEC. And there's some kind of little controversy about somebody picking Mizzou above Alabama. I don't know if you saw that or not.
No, I did not see that.
One of the multitude of TV networks now or channels that talk about college football or college sports. There's so many different sports networks out there on cable now.
Oh yeah,
it's hard to follow.
And then go to the internet, and it's even 10x that.
You got dudes like us who are trying to cut in on that. Trying to muscle in on that.
I mean, what do we know? First week
what do we got? Like,
I
was going to say, what do we got? Like 50, 60 years of,
Yeah, that doesn't matter because we're not confrontational and
right. We're not controversial.
We're not. It's just
we've had people try to tell us to be controversial.
Yeah.
It's like that's not
just call it the way we see it.
That's it. Tell the truth. That's it. That's what you got to do. Leave the controversy to everybody else.
Amen. That's the way it works.
But yeah, I mean, I find that especially during football season, I mean, it's really good like late at night after a full day of football because, I'm usually at like high school football and then college football. I'll be at Mizzou or I'll do whatever. And then 1 o'clock in the morning. And I know you're the same way because you'll still be up like texting me stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's good that you have like the Mountain Western Network.
Heck yeah. I love that West Coast football.
I love the West Coast football. Nothing better than watching, Pac-10 football. What is it like now? It's no longer.
Now they're basically the Big Ten.
Big Ten.
Pac-3, and then the other guys. I saw they rolled out all the uniforms at the Big Ten Media Day, which I think is pretty interesting. That's going to be.
Did you follow those?
Yeah, the scheduling, how that works out with the Big Ten, I think it's going to be. You look at the Ohio States and Michigan, who always had kind of a clear path to like a national championship, or if they did what they're supposed to do. You add in USC or an Oregon to the mix, and now you got a problem.
Very much so.
So that one win. That's why the SEC is always tough. Like, I mean, people talk about the Alabama, Georgia stuff. I mean, you got to get through one of those two, which, I'm not going to compare Michigan to, they had a great year last year, but perennially they're not, they haven't been.
Not on that same level.
Yeah, they're not. So, it'll be interesting to see how that mix works together. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of intricate scheduling, and as they get closer, because I mean, they want to be at a point where they all partake in that money, so they got to be advantageous how they schedule, right? I would think that of course you'd think there'd be fair scheduling, it'd just be luck of the draw, but there's got to be a lot of strategic play because the money.
Sure.
That's at play for the playoff system is really good, and everybody, partakes in the conference if they have conference teams that are in it, and which conference teams are in it, and they win it. And so there's a lot at stake. And so, I know that there's, the SEC and Big Ten both got their seat at the table, right? And they have automatic bids and all that stuff. So. It'll be interesting to see how that works.
Oh, it's going to be fascinating because you got the money, you have everybody wanting to position themselves. I mean, everybody, like you said, with the scheduling, there's not going to be really any undefeated national champions anymore. There's just going to be really difficult to do.
Or you're going to have, but you're going to have the UCF effect where these guys that are non-power conferences go undefeated.
Yep.
Say a Tulane or someone, they don't end up making it into the playoffs or whatever, a Memphis, and then all of a sudden, they got a claim to, hey, we got screwed, we didn't get to be in the playoffs, and so it's just going to be really interesting to see how they do it. But I think ultimately, like we've talked about, it's heading fast towards a seismic shift, and I think there was a vote last week where the NCAA is going to allow a new committee, if you will, that's inside of it because of how they voted in the past. Like the big beef was a lot, and I think it went both ways. You had like all these different conferences and levels of football voting on things that really did not pertain to them. It's like a D3, person could be voting on something that really had nothing to do with, they don't have anything to do with like a same rule for Division One, but there was some like votes and committees that would be, inclusive of all the different divisions, but really didn't make a whole lot of sense in how the application of those rules would affect those that voted, right? So like if you're voting on something as a Division One power 4 team, why would you have any care and say in what goes on at the D3 level? You're so distant from that. So, and then it looks the other way up. Like the D3 guys have very little, in common with those Power 4 teams. So, I think they're gonna carve out a new way to do that, which I see that as like the impetus, and setting the stage for them to have a full breakaway with those Power 4 schools.
So do you think it will just develop a whole new thing or just be known as a power conference and then they're all still there? You know what I mean? Because they're still going to want to play the cupcake schools, right? They're still going to want to, give the payday so you can come in and get beat up by them so it can pad the schedule, make them look good heading into conference play or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an SEC school, you do not want to play your entire, or Big Ten, your entire schedule be in conference, right? Because if that happens, you're going to have multiple losses, and you're going to have multiple controversies at the end of every season with who, power of schedule, all that, and you have these really good teams, stepping up and beating each other every week, which I think for the fans would be great to see, but that's just traditionally not how it's been done. So you got your conference games, your select conference games, and then you have your cupcakes that you beat up on, and that's it. I mean, it's just so I don't know. There's going to be a lot of shifts. Back to what we've talked about with other sports, being affected. University of Illinois AD is talking about no options are off the table, and you hear that with other ADs about like cuts and budget cuts, and they still have considerations about how they're going to have the Title IX considerations with paying the athletes, right? And there's just so many different interesting points to all this, and I think it'll all work itself out. But it's much like many things going on in our world today, where you're just like you scratch your head and you're like, how did we get in this situation, right? Because if cooler heads prevailed to begin with, we wouldn't be having this talk at all. We would just be talking strictly, maybe transfer portal stuff. But the reason why it was such a big deal is because they didn't allow it for so long. Then it exploded, and they wonder why it exploded. Then we talk about NIL and what a big deal that is, and then you look at like how that exploded, right? And so I think the NIL component, and you saw at the SEC days, they were they're upset about Mizzou's liberal policies on NIL, right? And Drinkowitz and those guys getting to have power in negotiation, which other states do not allow that. So I just think there's so many moving parts that if you're not careful, you blink and it's completely changed again. So
if there's a way possible, they're gonna even that out. They're not gonna let Mizzou have that kind of power.
Hell no.
So I mean, either everybody's gonna have to have it, or they will find a way to cut them off. Or we're just talking about long-term legal battles. Will really just make the game just seem really silly.
Well, it does, and so when you see Mizzou winning on 5-star this or 4 stars of that, that historically has not happened, right? You get the local guys, the whatevers, but those guys, when you get them, they're a big deal, and it ruffles the feather of some other fan base, right? And some other administration at a school or coaching staff. And you start winning too many of those battles, and you start to see that you have a competitive advantage. People don't like that. And so, but my perspective is, well, if you don't like it, then legislate your own rules.
Yeah, which I mean, like I said, that's either coming or they're just going to have to try to find some way to try to reel them in to stop it. And I mean, God's honest truth, none of that means anything to me. Claiming Mizzou has these many stars or they have this ranking in
Right.
recruiting means jack. Not a damn thing. You got to show it on the field. You still got to coach those guys. Why were these guys rated this way and in the first place? Because it's never explained.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No.
And now, if you're talking about them going head to head and picking off 10 5-star guys versus Alabama and Georgia, then I could see there'd be some,
Right.
everybody want to, beat their chest or whatever. But figure it out, and figure out how to win. I look at a program like Kansas State, and I follow their recruiting because they're in the region. And I got to tell you what, they do it smartly. There are two ways you can do this. And if you go about it and you get these guys and you want to tout, we got a 4-star, we got a 5-star, which is so arbitrary. You better win, or otherwise it's absolutely meaningless. Or you can be like Kansas State, who are picking off the guys, or you can be like Iowa, who are picking off the guys who they have their share of stars as well, but they might not be ranked as high. Look at Kansas State. All Kansas State's going to do is win. They're just going to keep winning.
And then they do it with guys that are 3s and 4, maybe a 4-star occasional, but mostly 2s and 3s.
Absolutely. A guy named R.J. Collins, Robert Collins, right? Junior, who came to the Elite Combine as a freshman. I invited him. He came in, knew he was a guy as a freshman, right? His recruiting didn't really pick up until this past offseason. He's going to Kansas State. Robert, right? RJ, who a lot of schools passed on, didn't have, I don't even know if he was ranked, to be perfectly honest with you, until he committed to Kansas State.
Yeah, that's when he got his ranking.
That's when he got his ranking. All he did was run a 10.56. He's a cornerback, run a 10.56 100-meter this past spring. Then all of a sudden it's like, hey, well, this guy might be pretty good. Well, the kid could always play football. Identified him as a freshman at Staley High School in Kansas City. Came over, killed it at the combine, was always that guy. But he wasn't at a power school. He wasn't at a pipeline school. So we got a little overlooked. Kansas State, they're great at picking off those guys.
Yeah, and guys like that, for you and I, it's pretty easy to see. And we'll be the guys that start to bugle those guys out early on in the process. And unfortunately, there are kids that you got to be careful recruiting too many big name guys because truthfully, a lot of those guys end up hitting because they're given so many opportunities because they can't fail on them, right? There's a lot of pressure.
Too big to fail.
To see, they're too big to fail. They see those guys that you really, if you have a team full of them or let's say a handful of them on a team, those guys, you don't want to see them fail because so much is invested financially now, NIL, emotionally with the fan base because of, oh my God, we got them. And then the coaching staff has got a real big deal. And I'll give you a real world scenario. There's a young man at a school within the state or two, either it's the state we're in or a state or two over. I don't want to divulge too much,
games, folks.
but high level position, a quarterback, paid him a ton of money. And one of the coaches on the staff had told me, he's like, I don't think he's I don't know if the kid was a 4 or 5-star. And he's like, I've had to convince the coach that what he bought in on was the hype of the star rating, right? And that the kid's a hell of an athlete, really, really good athlete. But the problem is that perspective is, well, this guy's this guy and this is who he is. And then, but he's like, but the problem is he really isn't in our system and he's not out playing anybody else, right? But the fan base is like, hey, this dude's a 4-star, 5-star. He should be playing. And the truth be told is, at some point you have to, I don't care if you're a 3, 4, or 5-star, 2-star, it doesn't matter. You have to put up or shut up. You have to be able to play at the level and at the consistency that's required by the team. And so, just because you have that, yes, there are guys that are giving, I would argue a lot of times the reason why a lot of those guys kind of have a pipeline directly to the NFL is, yes, some of them are just better athletes. But many times, if you go back throughout their career, they were given, an advantageous position and they were given more chances. And that, I know that sounds kind of like a cop-out, but it happens. I promise you. There are so many guys. Yes, there are 5-stars that fizzle out, 4-stars that fizzle out. But the opportunities, if you've been in college football long enough or been around it, you can clearly see the bias that is given towards those guys because they want to make sure, right? And they'll have guys that equally, and that's where I love the testing and you start to tease out like who the actual athletes are. Like even at like the middle school level, even at the high school level, if you're starting to project guys and you want to see who the best guys are, I promise you there are like at the middle school level, we'll use that as an example. There are parents that look at certain kids and they poo-poo like the kid and go, oh, he's not that good of an athlete, because they're thinking back to when that kid was a kindergarten through fourth grader, right? Oh, he wasn't very good. He didn't do much on the team. Well, that kid starts to kind of get coordinated, starts to work at it, whatever, gain some confidence, gain some love for the sport, and suddenly he is now a little bit better than everybody, but they still have the perception that he's not that guy, right? And so, now they're in middle school and the perception still is that kid, the stigma's still there that, oh, he's just not that good of an athlete, right? And the truth be told, there's so many guys that are like the middle school hero, high school zero. There's kids that are just slowly walking other kids down throughout elementary, throughout middle school, and then in high school, when you get to about 16, then the process is pretty much solidified, right? You'll know who the stars are, meaning the guys that are.
They might hit even later than that.
Well, right. Well, I was going to say that 16, they start to emerge, and then that might be that kid that's a 17, 18-year-old, right? And then who is now finally getting someone to look at him like Robert, right? So now they're finally looking at him and like, oh, damn, he's really good. Well, he's been good probably for a 3 or 4 year period,
that whole time, right?
But now, who would you rather have on your team? The guy that's thought he's really good since he was a freshman, or the guy that has worked his ass off to his junior and senior year, who's got a chip on his shoulder? I want those guys on my team, because the guys that think they're too good, like, look, there's two ways it goes when someone gets an offer when they're early, right? Either they think their stuff doesn't stink and they're done, right? And I've seen it 1,000 times, literally. Or you have that kid that's like, oh, I'm going to be the best ever in college and I'm going to work towards that, or whatever that goal is, right? I'm going to prove everybody that I am that guy. But I don't think there's much middle ground. I think it's, if you get an early offer, some of those guys, it's a kiss of death. Some of those other guys, yes, it does motivate them. But you and I, let's be truthful. How much do colleges even talk to people like us about that? I have intimate knowledge about so many kids because how we train them and we're around them. I've watched them mature since they've been kids. I know stories about their teams. I know, I got to tell you, it's few and far between. The best recruiters definitely talk to you about stuff like that. You know who does talk to you about stuff like that? NFL scouts. NFL scouts, well, because they're more intrigued in the process and what they're investing their money in.
And I got to tell you what, NFL scouts are taking interest in these guys in high school.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I will speak to NFL scouts, and at first I was a little shocked, but it's like, I guess it makes sense, right? You're investing all this money. They want to start early. They want to get that jump, and they want to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, and this is why when I scout, I start in middle school, right? Yep. And I follow them all the way through. And so I've seen it all. I've seen guys come in and they're it from day one, and then some will keep on that trajectory and do well, and some will keep on that trajectory through high school, and then they fail in college, or they don't reach their potential in college. I see some guys who start hot, slow down, and then it clicks in their senior year, and then they turn it back on, and or some guys just are late bloomers. And I know that's not a thing anymore because nobody believes in late bloomers. Don't go to JUCO, don't. But it's still
or it's just still reclassify, just hold them back, right?
Yeah, but it is still a thing to where guys are not necessarily heavily recruited, and then I see it, you see it, and you're like, I know that kid's going to kill it in college, and they do. And this is why every year when the NFL draft comes around, there are guys who pop up and are like, well, where did he go to school? Well, what did he do? Well, he wasn't a 5-star in college. Or you'll see him in the pro. Well, where did he go to school? And he's killing it.
Oh, right? The NFL's made up a ton of guys like that.
That's all it is. And that tells you just how inaccurate, the science of quote unquote recruiting or star labeling kids is.
Yep. So
or a guy in Missouri that I'm sure a lot of people remember, and I know that you know him well because you guys trained him a little bit, was DGB.
Yeah.
Can't miss, right? that's not
first
the
round
best
draft pick coming out of high school is what they were saying.
Yeah,
right?
man, that's a hell of a label to live with. And it messed with him, in my opinion, those whole 4 years
100%.
of high school.
And I don't know that he worked to a level.
College.
I don't think he worked at all or to the level he should have to help maintain that. And that's back to what I was saying. It's so hard when you're anointing someone when they're young, right? There has to be someone there knocking that person back down and bringing them back down to their own size. Because if you don't have that, which a lot of kids don't, like you'll go to 7-on-7 tournaments and everybody's, they're handling these guys with kid gloves because they got, offers to a big school. Who cares? Like at the end of the day, like you're getting to go to one school at a time. Like you're not like you're a good football player. Are you a better person? You look at the guys that are the guys that survive and stay through the game, or guys that do really well, in the game of football in college, and then they transition out to become, productive members of society. There's a constant theme of, doing the work that's necessary. The guys that fizzle out are the ones that don't. They make bad choices off the field. They don't do the work that they're supposed to do. And it happens constantly. So I think, the system is not set up all that well to support, those guys that are early offers or guys that are like multi-offer guys. And I think it is rewarding, when kids see their names come up in a rating system or whatever it might be. But they have to realize that means nothing, right? I mean, they could have made a mistake. You might not be rated that high or you might not be rated that low. I mean, who really cares? Like at the end of the day, you're going to be in practice with those guys, whether they're higher rated or lesser rated than you, and you got to win the day. And if you don't, the team moves on without you, right? And so, that goes on at all levels. But something that came up across my board this past weekend, I was talking to a guy who made a comment, and I thought it was interesting about because I was like, oh, here we go again. But if you do notice, like there is a little bit of a trend, and this is kind of a Mizzou thing. The guy made a comment, and it's someone that was an internal guy at Mizzou. I don't even know what his position was, but made the comment, there's just not that many good guys in Missouri. Like I'm like, well, if Mizzou goes, if you go back in time and you look even last season, who were the premier players on that team offensively? They're all St. Louis or Missouri born guys.
Just go back to the Pinkel era.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Blaine Gabbert. I mean,
right. You got all those guys.
Sheldon Richardson.
Right. Chase Kaufman.
Yep.
You get all these guys. So, yes, they do need kids from around the country. But, if you start, and it goes back to our earlier conversation, if you start to get too many guys from outside of, let's just say, the region, right, and you're getting a lot of guys to recruit in, they are more apt to leave than a kid that's from the region, right? And so in a transfer portal era, I think it's a dangerous move to place too many bets on people that you really are outside your recruiting area. I know that you would perceive if you're an SEC school, you can recruit the entire country. I get that. But your core basis should be the state of Missouri and those states that touch it, right? Because those kids have an identity that's in the region. But I did think it was interesting. The guy that told me, he's like, this guy doesn't think there's that many good athletes in the state of Missouri. And I thought, well, he doesn't really know the team yet. Right. The guy's newer to the team. But, I will say that, I've been told that there's people that think maybe kids from St. Louis and Kansas City are a bit entitled and they think that Mizzou really needs them. And I would agree. Like if a kid's being bullheaded and thinks he's a bigger deal than what he really is, yes. But there also is a commonality, or a line of respect between the two that should exist. And I think for Mizzou to be great, they need to control the borders, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that every school believes that, but if you look at state of Florida, those guys got to do the best they can to control that. Georgia controls its borders, right? Alabama controls its borders, right? They have kids from all over the country that come in, but their primary players a lot of times are kids that grew up wanting to be a Missouri Tiger or or Oregon Duck or whatever it might be. But I just found that kind of interesting.
Well, it's really interesting that he would say that, considering who are the top players on the team last year. Okay, who are that?
Brady Cook,
Luther Burden,
Cody Schrader.
And same thing when you flip sides. I mean, it's really kind of funny. You do need to have that base. And what's interesting about Mizzou in this year, they're not getting the top of the top guys in the state. And I know their class is ranked high and everything, but they're going guys from outside the area. So that's easier to sell people. This guy from Florida is great, right? But we know what the guys here are and what the guys here can do.
And this is no knock, but like at the end of the day, I would love to see what it looks like if Mizzou ever was, and not that maybe it could never happen.
You want them to be able to select but instead of recruit,
and right, because you look at guys like Kyron Williams, right?
Yep.
Jeremiah Love, Aeneas Williams. Those are three names of guys that are pretty darn good.
I'll be starting this year,
that have gone to Notre Dame, which that's kind of a unique sell, obviously. But those are guys that had I would just love to see. And now on the offensive line, tons of Missouri guys, right? I mean, which I think bodes well. So the guy that made the comment clearly just maybe doesn't have his bearings set yet, or
it was just flippant.
He might be a little flippant or upset that maybe some of these St. Louis kids or Kansas City kids have not come their way. And that could be. And I get it. There's some frustration with putting time in and not getting guys. And maybe there is. Maybe there's an attitude that I'm unaware of that's like, hey, a little like, hey, you need me. And it's like, no, you need each other. Yeah. Right. And Missouri football needs it's true sons to stay home, right? And so
there were plenty of years of Mizzou where people were like, "Oh, you're entitled. We don't need you," and it was the Bob Stell era.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So people know what that looks like. Larry Smith changed that a little bit, and then Gary Pinkel really, I mean, he made that his main focus, and he was absolutely right, and he knew it from Washington. You have to have the base of your team be your local guys.
Interesting too with Larry Smith, early years, Larry Smith, he got a bunch of guys from Missouri, the Brock Olivos, the Ron Janes, the, guys throughout the whole Corby Jones. All those guys are Missouri guys, right?
Yep.
And there was some winning. It wasn't unbelievable, but there was a good period of winning. And then I will tell you, after that period of winning, all of a sudden the dudes from Texas started showing up and bigger Florida, and they missed on guy after guy in that period, and it was and they were the high level recruits.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not saying that's going on now, and then things have definitely changed since the '90s and or early 2000s, but it's something to throw out there because it kind of like caught me off guard. I'm like, I mean, some of your best play. I mean, your offensive linemen. I mean, you got Green, you got
Membo.
Membo. Like you got, Connor Tollefson. You got, that's pretty good names right there.
And the guys coming up.
And you got Mookie Cooper, and Luther. So that's two St. Louis guys. Makai Miller, another guy. Brady Cook. So you got like guys that are Missouri guys. So
Marvin Burks.
Yeah. So right. I think there might be some, maybe taken out of context, but I brought it up only because it just kind of it's frustrating because you don't want to see that mistake made again because it has been made in the past. That I lived it, I saw it, I know it all too well, and so I think keeping that healthy mix because how many St. Louis guys are committed in this? You got Brett Northfleet. I mean, that offense is stacked with St. Louis guys and Missouri guys, right?
Yep.
But how many guys are currently committed that are St. Louis guys?
St. Louis guys?
Or just
off the top of my head, there's Jack Lang and Jason King, Dayton Hopkins. Those are all three really good guys.
Missouri guys, yeah.
But the guys up there at the top, Isaiah Mosey, Corey Sims, DJ Miller, Dylan Duff, Carson Boyd, they're not going there. Kamari Moore. Another shout out to a elite football combine guy who came as a freshman, killed it. But those guys, and that's what's going to be interesting. That dynamic this year is going to be interesting, is those guys are headed to other schools or they're committed to other schools. You never know what really happens until signing day, but it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how that all pans out.
Yeah, and hey, this could be happening all over the country. Obviously, we have a view, more specifically on the Missouri side of things. But, obviously you do need kids from all over the country. You can't pass up getting a, top-rated 5-star quarterback. But again, we've seen those guys come and go if they don't fit, whatever it might be, or there's a coaching change or staff change. Some of that stuff doesn't come to fruition. But they clearly have an awesome class coming in.
Yes.
If you look at it on paper, it's as good as they've had in a long time. So, but yeah,
winning does that.
Huh?
Winning does that.
Yeah, winning does, and having a proactive NIL program
that really
also helps as well. So
that really helps.
So yeah, and that could be a huge component of why it's working that way, and maybe it's a little bit different than say in the years past when they would recruit guys from hotbeds of Houston and down in South Florida.
Which Pinkel had success with that.
Yeah,
but he didn't make it the bulk of
he
what he
still had his tried and true dudes, and he landed a lot of the big name guys out of Missouri.
And then he really had a lower base of the guys who weren't necessarily the big name guys. Correct. But they were really good, talented guys, especially the offensive linemen.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the Justin Britts, out of Lebanon, Missouri. Guys like that. And just again, you go back, you do that. Justin Britt, he was not a heavily recruited guy. But he was just one of those big guys from, in-state Missouri, out Lebanon, Southwest Missouri.
Yep.
Big kid who he saw what he was because he arrived at Missoula. He was like, skinny. He was a 6'6", skinny, 250 maybe, but he was really athletic.
Yep.
That's and they developed him. That was a time where they had the time they developed guys, and Pinkel really developed guys pretty well.
That's the other thing is like
Coach Cool with the defensive line and then the offensive line.
Yes, stacked.
Yep,
golden era
developed those guys.
D-line.
Marcus Golden developed that guy. Shane Ray developed those guys.
So the problem is you recruit these guys now, and do you have the time to develop them? Right? Do you have time to bring in?
They don't.
A 4-star that's a 4-star because he's uber athletic and he does not have the skill yet. I would say that most of these schools do not have line technique coaches. They have they have guys that can work on it, and there are old school coaches that definitely do it. But don't get me wrong, but by and large, with how practices are structured, there's just not a lot of time to bring guys along that need to be brought along, right? Unless there is a true interest in why they need to do that, right? If they're in the too deep and they're really light, then that might be a compelling argument to do that. But I think, and that's why we tell kids, you got to get your stuff done now. You get like the training starts in middle school, right? Like if you want to start learning skill sets, it starts early. It doesn't start late. Like it's and I get it. There's some kids that have no idea what they want to do. Just like you're getting college, you have no idea what you want to do, and then you pick your major as you get deeper into school. But understand there are certain people that have been doing it for a long time that are athletic and do have the ability, and then suddenly they're the ones that are going, well, how'd they get that offer? Where'd they come from, right? Because they were strategic about it. They built over time. They got better. They listened to good advice. They did things that, are warranting, development and getting better so that when the time comes and your name gets called, you're ready to jump right in. So I think, there's just so much to recruiting. There's so much to being recruited. And the reality of it is that kids, there's a lot of uncertainty in it. The one certainty is, though, if you're on the other side of this listening and you have a child or you are an athlete, the one certainty is that you can never work too much. You can't focus on what your goal is of your end game of playing college football, right? Or professional football.
Yeah.
You need to work at it because, saying and doing are two different things. Your objective is, okay, I'm going to do this. Well, I have to lay a plan and start to build towards that, right? Doesn't mean every day is going to be good. Doesn't mean every rep is going to be perfect, but you got to learn from those bad reps. You got to learn how to be critical and self-critical and of your mechanics or of your technique and be coached. You have to learn how to be coached. It's one thing to have an opinion about what you did and why you did it. It's another thing to not understand the other person watching you has a better vantage point than you have. And I know it's hard because you're the athlete and you think, well, this is how I do it. And a lot of young males have that, that us males in general, we have that bullheadedness where it's like, no, I'm going to show you how I do it. Well, the problem is you start pulling that stuff in high school. And we have that with kids a lot at the facility is just say, hey, you cannot behave that way. You can't talk that way. You can't have someone say something to you and then you give a funny look thinking you're being funny. And a coach isn't going to play that game. Like they'll find someone else. Like They want people that they can trust and they know that they can, go into battle with.
And you never know who's there watching you, taking notes of what you do. on what you behave, how your behavior is. And especially if you're an elite athlete, right? We talk about DGB, right? He was an elite athlete. I remember him being an eighth, ninth grader, and he was already running like a 4.5, 4.45 hand,
Yeah.
40. He was 6'6", 220 pounds. You're 6'6", 220 pounds. They throw you a screen pass and you just take it 80 yards, right? Because you're that big, you're that strong, you're that fast. You don't feel like you need to work on things. But it caught up with him, right? And he got the rep. Yeah, he got the number one guy in the nation. And I see it now with guys who are really good athletes. I see it going on, and they get a lot of attention and a lot of recruiting. I don't see some of them developing themselves properly, right? And so I know how this is going to end because I've seen this movie before.
Yep, and the ending is not pretty.
No, and it's like whatever happened to.
Well, I mean, there's a guy who does videos on YouTube. His name's, I think it's Matt B. Great is his call name, but he does a lot of SEC stuff.
Is it Matt B. Great?
No, this guy, but he does stories about whatever happened to this guy.
Oh yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it's just making poor choices off the field, right? Yep. Sometimes it literally is like it just wasn't a good fit. Things didn't go well, or they went out and had like a quarterback had a horrible outing his first couple times and got replaced. I mean, some of that stuff happens.
Yeah.
But that's part of putting yourself in the ring and letting yourself compete, right? And sometimes the chips just don't fall your way. But if you are a athlete that wants to be better, and you want to do all these things you say you're going to do. And that's where I look at like so many kids, there is a time and place for everything, right? Going out and running routes, going out and throwing balls, whatever it might be, hanging out with your buddies, that's a good thing. But if you have not perfected the skill set and you are continually in the rehearsal phase of going out and running routes or going out and guarding people, and you don't know what you're doing, right? And you have a coach that's over there every other time going, oh, good. Yeah, good. Yeah. Like just the feedback is, oh, good. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Good job. Oh yeah. That if you hear stuff like that and there's not constructive feedback and constructive criticism, you're in the wrong place. Like there is a technique, there is a correct way to do it. There's an incorrect way to do it. Like I told you, I've been, one of my quarterbacks and I are really deep into a conversation on the phone and via text and then in person about mechanics, right? And back and forth. I mean, he's sending me pictures of things that, I sent him 2 videos this morning of some throws with some thoughts on things that his, footwork and upper body mechanics. And then he, sent back, hey, look, about his front, like things in the mechanic that he can improve. And he's like, hey, he has a thought process on it. And then going down that pathway where we can talk to each other about what it is and how he can embody those changes in the coming weeks as he gets into camp, as he's doing his final preparations for college football in the season. There's things. It's a never-ending process. But if somebody's back behind you placating and telling you, "Oh, good job, oh yeah," like yes, with a younger athlete who is throwing the ball, in my scenario, if there's certain things that are met criteria-wise, I will say good job to reward them for what they did. Knowing that there's probably 5 things that still need to be fixed, but we can't fix them all at once. With a college guy or a guy wanting to go to, in high school, you got someone behind you telling you good job or, oh yeah, that's it. Oh, all that junk, all the stuff. If you just listen to these guys, they'll put their videos out online on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, TikTok, and you listen to actually what's being coached. If you don't get a lot of, if you get a lot of, what I'm saying, that is not a good sign. That is not a good sign
at all. How much
do
you like it when a kid you're training or coaching says, yeah, I know. And then they don't fix it. They don't correct it.
Well, I always tell athletes, look, if you say, yeah, I know, or you nod your head, that gives me permission to move on in this conversation and in this mold of teaching and correcting and training.
Right.
But yeah, there's so much of that goes on, and kids don't know what they don't know. They think putting in work sometimes is going out and playing.
Right.
The hard stuff is the
work.
grind and doing it over and over and over. If people come in and watch what we do from a training perspective, it's really boring, right? It's okay. Like it's like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes
Unless
people
you're like
come in
me.
and they think it
Yeah.
wants to be like this real sexy process and they want to do all this. And that's what they see online.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, there's a reason why, this past summer at Lindenwood, let's just use Miami of Ohio, 500 quarterbacks came through. 3 of the quarterbacks of the 4 that they offered were all kids that have been training since they've been young, right? None of them have real varsity experience. Well, one of them does. The other 2 have none really at all, a little bit, but not nothing major.
But they showed what college coaches are looking for.
That's exactly my point, right? The coach looks at them.
Didn't have to see any film.
No, because they see it. It comes off their hand differently, and but those things are done way in advance. You don't do it the week before. You don't try and get in shape right before you get there, or trying to throw better. And it's not about going out and just running more routes or throwing more balls or blocking more. It's about technique and knowing exactly how to sequence the technique in time to alleviate any sort of issues with inside of a play, right? So if something happens, you got to know how to counteract it, and stuff happens every play, right? So learning those things in the offseason, if you don't have a solid base of mechanics or footwork to begin with, making those adjustments becomes nearly impossible, right? And then being self-critical becomes nearly impossible, if not 100% impossible, because you have no basis to understand how to correct it, because you don't know what you did wrong, because you can't feel it. And the person that's supposed to be telling you what they see is telling you good job,
right?
And telling you, oh yeah, you get it next time. No, technique matters. Training and development matters. Running around cones mindlessly, running through ladders mindlessly it may get you warm, but it's not a tried and true technique that's going to stack to the point where you're turning around and looking. And I'm telling you, like we were talking about DGB,
right?
When we got him, this like he was getting ready to go to the NFL, and obviously he had some off-field problems, and he had a decent combine, not unbelievable, but he's a guy that probably never ran a 40 at a combine, right? Because he didn't have to, because he was already rated number 1, and so he gets there. He wasn't very advanced at it, did okay. Other people trained him for that, and then he got to us, and we were working on, route running, keeping him in shape before he got drafted.
Yeah,
and he couldn't catch the ball properly. Right, little things you work with second grade boys,
right? Because, like I said, back in high school, everything's a screen pass, right? Everything's a screen pass. Everything's a bubble screen, and you just navigate and push people off.
And guys catch on their body.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just silly. Like, but there's
you get a little bubble screen like this, right? Like you said, I watched enough of them live in high school to see what that was, and you hoped.
It would change.
It would change. And just like you were talking about, it doesn't matter, especially today, if you are an elite caliber athlete, if you don't have the training, they pass on you, right? Or they might take you.
Just because you're like 6'4" and you're a freak.
Yeah, you're a freak. You're a freak athlete. But even then, you see some guys and you're like, well, man, that guy's really athletic. Me and you were talking last night about somebody who's a really freak athlete.
Yes.
Right? At 6'3", 210, who we think is going to have a huge year. He's training. Right?
Yes, he's training.
You've had a hand in him, and you've seen him. And we're talking about a guy who's 6'3", 210 pounds. Who I was telling you, I saw him locking guys down at cornerback.
He can play receiver.
He can play receiver.
Who he reminds me of?
Linebacker. Yeah,
he reminds me of a kid named Will Lee that played at Kirkwood,
but bigger and more, just better. I mean, maybe.
Well,
not
he's got a
better
bit higher. Yeah,
he's got a higher ceiling.
His body right now is much better.
Yeah, because he could play. He could wind up playing edge. He could be, which is a family trait of of his, and just kill it. He could play running back. He could just do it. The only thing he might not be able to do is quarterback.
Right? Yeah. So, but those guys like that, you almost want to see them just stay hungry and not get overly offered, right? And get because it's coming.
He's under the radar.
Once the first big one pops, it's gonna be like, oh my God, like where was this guy at? And then all of a sudden he's a national recruit.
Yeah.
So the hope for that is when that happens, that he's got enough good people in his ear, which I think his head coach will keep him dead on line. He's around good people, and he's got family members that are have been there but done that. But keep him focused on what needs to be focused on, because at the end of the day, his opportunity is going to be better than a lot of other kids' opportunity because of his genetics, his makeup, his natural acuity, how he can catch the ball. He's worked at it. But yeah, again, he could play multiple positions, but it speaks to his athleticism, right? And so I really do think when you find guys like that are
he does have good knowledge, and he does want to learn, right? Because I saw him throw him in there at cornerback. He's like, really? But he wanted to do it. He has the proper mindset right now. And he's a pretty good kid, and I know
he's aggressive enough.
He's aggressive enough, and you've done stuff with this. So you've had a hand, and I think is he training with you guys now?
Yeah, he was in just last week.
Was he? Yeah, and so perfect combination of all those other intangibles you talk about, and he's training now.
And he was the one who initiated the training. And remember, it is not as sexy to come into a facility and run drills and techniques and work on top ends of your routes and work on getting off press or whatever it might be. It is a lot more fun to go to a field and run routes and then ooh and ah and have someone film it and then put the video out there. I get it. But at the end of the day, if your end game is to be a high-level player and to execute at a high level when you get to college, you will get there and you will be very thankful that you have those sets of skills because you've worked for them. Not, everybody there does one-on-ones. Everybody's done one-on-ones in their life, or everybody's done, throwing at targets. But you have to know why you're doing it, and you have to be coachable enough to make that leap. And I've been doing this so long, and I know you have too. You can see mistakes being made, but it's really hard. And the sad thing is that the same guys that are perpetuating some of these behaviors as young coaches are the same guys that did not take the coaching when they were kids that same age. And that is a very dangerous spot to be, because if that guy has not gone through and done it himself, like, look, I'll tell you, when I was in high school, I went to a number of camps because there was no skills training like what we do today. That was not around. But I can tell you this. I went to the library. I've found books on plyometric training. I found books on route running. I found books on mechanics.
As an old school Google right there.
Yeah, that's what I did. Google and if I got to go to 2 camps every summer, and I would write down the drills that we would do. And I actually had high school coaches ask me at my high school, hey, because I introduced a bunch of new stuff to them that I had learned. And this is kind of the impetus of me doing what I do today. Little did I know, but I just was so intrigued by all of it, right? And it was like the new age of training and development that was really so forward thinking at the time. Like, I just wanted to get better. But I would do these drills, and I was asked by one of the coaches, hey, would you with our big VCR camera, would you film some of these drills before you go off to college so we can keep doing them with the kids? And I look back on that, and we did. And I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I was receptive to that style of coaching from other people, and I was seeking it out. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of guys right now in the game that are young coaches that were the very same guy that that training was around when they were kids, and they were the ones who didn't do it because they one, were not in tune enough with it, 2, didn't take it serious enough, or 3, literally just didn't have the mindset to be that type of athlete themselves. So I think you just got to be careful in this world of what we're doing. And I'm talking about not just anybody that's local in St. Louis. I'm talking about the internet. I'm talking about, your YouTube guys. There's tons of people, Instagram, Twitter, turn it on. There's everybody and their brother is an expert in this. But if you boil down, like, who have they coached? What has their success been? What's the longevity? How many years have they done it? And how many people have spawned out of that training and development and become better than when they started? And that doesn't mean just getting good kids when they're juniors and seniors and putting your name on them, or having a guy come in town and working with them. There needs to be.
I can take you to that next level,
right? Like, yeah, right. Yeah, they're gonna get you right.
Yeah,
and then you see videos. You're like, hey, this you're gonna get hurt
backwards. Yeah, you're going backwards, man.
So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but I also think that, tried and true and training and development with professionals that have done it before
Look at you. You were laying the foundation for Elite Football Academy when you were in high school. You didn't even know it.
Yeah, I know. And then I got out coaching, and
That's
I
pretty wild.
realized really quickly, that, man, we don't spend any time in practice on skill development. And so I just took it upon myself to start training the quarterbacks and receivers. It was probably highly illegal, but I was training them on the weekend 25 years ago. And those guys are all grown men now. But I was training those guys because I wanted to win. And I just thought, we don't get any time to work on this stuff in practice. And I know that we weren't unique. I know in college we didn't have much time to work on it. So that was the impetus. And then started training those guys and then did that for 6-7 years on weekends and evenings at fields. And again, this was well before internet and all that stuff and people, doing it. And then we moved inside in 2006 and been doing it ever since indoors at our facility. But
right.
I just look at it as, I take it very serious. I love doing it. And, and it is one of those professions anybody can just jump in, but that doesn't mean you're
capable
or correct. You're the right person for the job. Right. So, you know what, but all in due time. I mean, I bet you, over my time of doing what I'm doing, the number of facilities or programs or individuals that have come and gone is pretty significant. It's, if I were to go back in time and kind of count it up, there's a lot of people that are in and out of it, right? People move, people change, life situations change, people lose interest in it, whatever it might be. Or they might just, not have people enough to, getting results that people come back to them over and over and over again. So,
well, what's interesting about Elite is it's a one-stop shop for everything, every position you play, anything that you want to do. And I know there's a lot of guys out there training, and God bless them. And especially on the western side of the state, I'm seeing more and more guys, but they're one guy, right? Yep. And they're trying to do it, and and they're good at what they do. But there's nothing like Elite.
You got to watch the guys too that train multiple positions that are like, I could do your quarterback, DB, safety, linebacker, receiver. Yes, I could train a lot of positions, but I am not an expert in those positions. Matter of fact, I trained receivers for a long time. I gave that up probably 10 years ago. And yes, I could jump in and help. I give insight into what I know and what we've worked on, but I don't do it anymore. Right. And so I exclusively work with quarterbacks, and that's what I do every day, 7 days a week. So, as soon as I'm done here, I literally go right back and I start training, and I'll be training until 9:30, 10 o'clock tonight. And I'm around other guys that are training other athletes. So, iron sharpens iron. So we're around other guys and we're in the same program, so we can really bounce things off of each other and really develop. So again, whether you're in St. Louis or you're anywhere else, I really employ you to, do research on your community, because there's guys every city. There's there's definitely facilities that have popped up, but I would look at those that have had some longevity, because that is the first sign that there's some success happening with the athletes. Like I look at our Wall of Fame and the people that have come through, and the coaches, the guys that we have coached that are now coaches or GMs or front office, or people that have worked in our program that are like, out in the game of football. And it's really, really exciting to see, because, we know a lot of people in the game, which then what does that do for us? It helps us, right, JP? Because having those connections helps our kids. And if you're in it for the kids, that's probably paramount, because connections and helping people through the process is as good as it gets if you're looking for that type of reward.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, one of the first things I do when I see a kid and he's doing well, I can always tell who's trained and who's not. And whether they're down in Southwest Missouri or Kansas City, Columbia area, I always ask them, where do you train? Do you train anywhere? Who trained you? And you can really tell the really, really good ones. And that's really what separates them, because there's a lot of good athletes. Who's training you? And you get guys coming from Columbia, you get guys coming from Macon, Missouri, you get guys coming from, Southwest. I mean, all over the place, the Boot Heel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's
but find somebody, you're absolutely right. Find somebody who knows what they're doing, and they're really good at it.
Yep. And it just, if it doesn't smell right, doesn't seem right, you get a lot of, That's the other thing too.
You know what's.
I'm not a huge fan of like the age disparity in training. Like I get it that it's cool for like a 5-year-old to be there with the 18-year-old,
right,
or the 5th grader to be with the senior, but they can get there and watch. I mean, we view our programs the way we do them so that the younger guys can watch the older guys before and after their training sessions. And I think that's a huge deal because they get to see older people doing it, right? And it kind of brings them along and shows them the pathway that they should be taking. But, when you see guys that are training.
You mean you don't want a 7-year-old training with a senior to be in high school?
No. I mean, I will tell you, we let very few middle schoolers train up, unless they can hold their weight, right? But if they start to kind of move and screw the session up, at the middle school and youth ages, it's a little bit different because there's kids are at all different age, variants of development. But you start getting high school and you let middle schoolers up there with grown men.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, unless they are a kid that has really worked their butt off and trained and developed. But we do get a lot of people that will be like, well, my son's played up a couple years, and it's like, well,
right,
okay,
but
if you're gonna get in there with the juniors and seniors, we want you to come to the younger O-line group because we know he's gonna have a better outcome. That doesn't mean he can't do it later.
Right. Or if you're like an Ace Herman Dawson, right, who as a 7th grader came to elite and was like already 6'3", like 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't miss a beat, and everybody couldn't believe you're 13.
Right.
You're 13.
Yeah, you're 13. And the problem is that kid is so big that there's no middle school players that are even in the same realm as him. Right?
He has to compete against those guys.
But the size is relative because you have people that they'll call and tell you how big their son is, and then you hear like a size, and it's pretty good size.
Doesn't mean a thing.
But it's not really
good size.
It's not usually, right? And so, but
Ace is unique.
Yeah, Ace is really unique. So I think that, as you look at your, off-season development program, like obviously it's coming up. The other thing I would really, really get people to think about is, what are you going to do in season this year? What are you going to do lifting wise? What are you going to do skill development wise? Because
you could do a whole show on that.
Your body is perishable. The skill sets that you learn are all perishable. Like if you don't use them, and you don't refine them, you lose them, and the edge gets torn off of them, right? And it gets a little worse each time. So, what are you going to do physically, lifting wise? Some high schools have a great in-season lifting. A lot do not. We got kids that are starting to get lined up for what they're going to do. 2 to 3 days a week, if you can do that, is a huge difference in how you end the season. Not necessarily how you start, but you have a lot of kids that'll lift for 8 months, basically, January through August, or, December through late July. And then they get in season and they just they let it all deteriorate. And it won't deteriorate super fast, but it will when you start to get dinged up, you start to get injuries. You have things that are changing, physiologically. So you're not, you're favoring one leg versus the other. Working out in season is probably one of the most overlooked things that kids, go into the season and they're not even prepared for it. Right. And so the vast majority of schools do not do a ton because they have, they're working with limited time in the weight room and limited time. As soon as that school ends, they're getting that practice and trying to get your butt back out out on the bus or however you get home. So a lot of schools do have weightlifting classes. Do that if you can. Do that for sure, because that's something's better than nothing, right?
Gotcha. Yep. So we're really up against it here because we got Dead Week coming up, and then after that, it's boom, it's on for the high school stuff. You got the college camps gonna start up. Mizzou's gonna get rolling. Pro football, all kinds of good stuff's gonna be coming up, and we're gonna be here to talk about it all. So enjoyed ourselves as always. Anything you want to add before you dip on out of here?
No, excited. I mean, the NFL teams this week, college next week. High school a week or two after, ready to go.
It's all going to be rolling. We're going to be here to talk about it. So appreciate you tuning in. You can catch us at football360show.com or right here. Wonderful producer Joe put all of our socials on Instagram and X. So check that out. Check out everything, football360show.com. And we will talk to you soon. See ya.